to the different TV channels to show the airplanes allegedly crashing. That's why we had the accidental nose out on one of the buildings. They were the ones that sent the alleged cell phone messages, which never occurred. They did all kinds of stuff. They made probably transponder things for the different ATCs to phone.
So you're saying the hologram had to be done by a plane in the air?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it was done by a projector, a holographic projector.
Okay, so the technology exists out there. Have you? I mean, and I understand that you talked to your friend who wrote the book, Norm. But where else have you heard about this holographic technology?
Ron Blackburn. You know who he is?
No.
Do you know who he is?
No, I don't.
Ron Blackburn was with Lockheed for 30 years. He was with the stealth project up at Groom Lake for 20 years. He was the one that I first heard there was aliens at the test site. Now, when I first met him, 10, 15 years ago, he denied knowing everything. Now he's gotten a little bit more lax about what he says. I mean, he said, up at Groom Lake, there's an administration building, just for the aliens up there. Ron was at my birthday party here. So he's retired now.
We need to get to this guy as well.
He's retired. He's very careful about what he says.
Okay.
He still has retirement, but he came to my birthday party, and he told us about holographic projections. He says they contain sound, light, heat, everything. I mean, everything is there. One of the problems that people have with holographic projections, well, I saw it. It couldn't have been, they think of holographic projections like you see in Las Vegas or at a birthday party,
right,
where it's a little dancing light like
where
there.
You can see through it.
Yeah, and they say, well, I saw it, couldn't be. It's ridiculous. And then they say, well, how would they have done the sound? They would have had speakers all up and down, the street. It's too bad people, they don't really realize how far we are advanced with our technology. They were fooled. It was a scam. It was a psyop. And
okay, so who ran it?
Basically, I call them the nasty NASA Nazis and the military-industrial complex. And Hoagland tells us exactly who they are and how they took over. And that's who ran it. Now, in March 31st, 2007, last year, a guy named Morgan Reynolds, have you heard the name?
Yes.
Okay. Filed a suit called a quit-em complaint against these 22 companies. And we're talking about major companies here. Science Applications International Corporation, Applied Research, Hughes, all these companies right here are being sued. And what they're being sued for is accepting money for providing a government agency with fraudulent information. The government agency they provided with this fraudulent information was NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. NIST was asked by President Bush to determine exactly why the World Center collapsed. What actually caused it to collapse? And they came up with a reason that, the jet fuel, and it was just so far ridiculous that Morgan filed this suit, and it's 40 pages, and he outlines everything that they got wrong. And so the suit has been going along in court now.
And you testified as to the holographic planes as part of the suit, right?
Well, what I did is I filed an affidavit on January 28th, 2008, this year, in support of the complaint and in opposition to the motion to dismiss. And basically what I testified is, number one, why the airplanes couldn't have traveled as fast as they did, and how they couldn't be flown as well as they were, and why there was no wreckage in there. And I think this
other pilots haven't come forward because this is...
Well, other pilots are employed. They can't afford to come forward. There's very few, people, there's a lot of...
But this is our country we're talking about,
They can't do it. A lot of my information was taken from aerodynamics for naval aviators, and I explain why an airplane cannot fly 500 miles at 1,000 feet. It has to do with drag, and it has to do with power, and it has to do with the fact that they use turbofans. It just cannot happen. So anyway, the government's and NIST contention that that they flew 500 miles an hour, it didn't happen. It couldn't happen. So basically, that's what I explained in my suit. Now, you say, why don't many pilots come forward? Many have. There's an organization called pilotsfortruth.com, and I'm a member, one of the earlier members of that, and there's a lot of people that realize that this couldn't have possibly happened. There is no an airplane like a Boeing 757 flying into the Pentagon. No, that didn't happen.
So what happened at the Pentagon?
At the Pentagon, a bomb went off to make that hole there, and they had a 55-gallon drum of diesel fuel that a guy lit to make all that black smoke there. And April Gallup,
I think the April Gallup story is fascinating.
April Gallup was a Army...
Okay, so let's go back where we were, which is...
we're talking about April Gallup.
Right, April, okay.
April Gallup was a Army specialist, and I forget what her job was, but she had a top secret clearance. She was sitting about 40 feet from the where the explosion made the hole in the front of the Pentagon, and she had her 6-month-old son right below her desk, and she thought that was odd because usually when she went to work before going through security, they had to put the little kids in daycare, but on that day security said no, take the kid in with you. So she had it. She had the kid right below in his little holder there, and she says it was really strange because as she pressed the on button for her computer, that's when the building exploded. And she said a lot of debris came down on her, and she saw the hole over there. And she thought, I got to get out of here. So she picked up her kid, put it over his back, and went towards that opening. And she got through that opening onto the grass, which is where eventually triage was set up. But she said she saw no missile, saw no airplane, smelled no fuel. There was no airplane in there. And later in the hospital, she got interviewed by Army intelligence, and they asked her what she saw. And she started to say, I didn't see anything. And they said, no, yes, you did. You saw a Boeing 757 crash into there. And she says, no, I didn't. I mean, there was nothing there. And she's gone through hell for the last 4 or 5 years trying to get medical care. It's been a really very, very sad story. But one of the things I wanted to show, this is a page from a military manual talking about stuff that they would like to get in the year 2025. This is called Airborne Holographic Projector. You can see where I got it. You can't get it anymore here, but was www.au.af.mil. And I got about 250 pages of this stuff. But
it's talking about a hologram machine.
It refers to enemy perception management. Is that right? That's such a wonderful euphemism. Have I remembered that right?
Yeah, it says, brief description. The holographic projector plays a three-dimensional visual image in a desired location, removed from the display generator. The projector can be used for psychological operations and strategic perception management. It is also useful for optical deception and cloaking, providing a momentary distraction when engaging an unsophisticated adversary. And it has capabilities, precision projection of a three-dimensional visual images into a selected area, supports PSYOP and strategic deception management, and provides deception and cloaking against optical centers.
Okay, and when was that written? Do you know?
I think in 99. I'm not sure. I'll give you an address where you can get it now.
Okay.
It's not at that address, but I think it's at Maxwell Air Force Base.
But you have to. We have to believe that if that's out in the public sector, that this is just the tip of the iceberg as far as this technology goes.
Absolutely.
Strategic perception management. Isn't that just wonderful?
It's great.
I just think that's so great.
All right.
An unsophisticated enemy, like the people on the streets of New York.
I was going to say that. And I thought, you know what, I don't think I'll say that.
Nothing personal against
But
you.
they have, and then when you go into it, they have what they call the hybrid high energy laser system. But when you go in here and get a close-up of this system, it's showing you how they could attack right between Iran and Afghanistan. It's hilarious, you know. That's where they'll be attacking, and that's where they knew they were going to be attacking back in, 1999, you know. And that was published then, so you can see how far ahead they plan this stuff. I mean, they plan it 30 years ahead. I was looking for that page.
Okay, when you say they're going to be attacking between Iran and
Afghanistan, that's where the pipeline is coming. They want that area. That's why
so that's why we're going to war with Iran, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, we want to clear that area so we can run the pipeline down there.
And they're going to use, it sounds like you're saying they're going to use a special kind of weapon to attack them.
Well, they could use that hybrid high-energy laser. You know, they got plenty of stuff they could use.
Right.
But it was just odd that, that it would be already on paper available to the public to show them where they're going to be attacking.
Okay, this is...
What you said to us off camera just before we started was you felt that there was going to be, I think you used the words a nuclear war.
Oh, yeah, I have no doubt that we're going to nuke Iran. I'm sure that's in the plan, and Cheney certainly wants to do it. I don't know, have any inside information, but it looks to me like one of the possible scenarios would be Bush gets assassinated in October, Cheney becomes president, and then declares martial law, and then something happens and where we have to attack Iran. Of course, we won't attack Iran, we'll get Israel to do it, and they'll attack them with their nukes, and then we'll slap them on the wrist by saying, we're going to give you $50 billion for a rehabilitation program here so that you won't nuke anybody else. Psychological rehabilitation program. We'll give them,
Okay, but nobody's going to get away with nuking anyone. I mean, in other words, you're going to have China, you're going to have Russia. I mean, basically we're going to be in World War III at that point, right?
Yeah, but it won't be that big. What they're going to do is cut the cables, communication
cables. Oh, the undersea
cables.
cable thing.
Yeah, so that there's not a lot of not communications, so that they
no one knows what's really happening.
No one really knows what's happening. It'll be all handled on an upper level. All this is handled on an upper level. All this has been planned in communication with and in agreement with China and Russia. They all know what's going on. So it'll be, just to try out new weapons.
Well, actually, this is what, again, our Henry Deacon says. He says China's in on it. There's going to be a war with China, but they already know it's planned.
Of course. And like everybody was ready for the Japanese Cayuga and the Chinese satellite, and on ATS they said they'll tell us what's going on, they'll give us the real pictures, and all they did was recycle old NASA pictures, And of course China was very embarrassed. They said these are not recycled NASA pictures, but you could go right to where yes, that was an old recycled NASA picture. Now, what they're doing up there orbiting the moon, if they are orbiting the moon, I don't know, but they're certainly not taking pictures, that they could use for themselves.
Why not?
Because they're already in on it. They already know what's there. I mean, we
So
mind
what's
them.
the modus? So what's the MO behind doing all of this? I mean, why are they going to plan wars, nuclear? You're talking about nuclear wars where millions of people are going to die. Land is going to become uninhabitable. I mean, this is crazy. Even if they want to keep a pipeline there, what's the point in making the land? I mean,
they've cleaned up nuclear weapons in the past 30 years. They don't have that much radiation.
Why go nuclear, though? I mean, it's so messy. Why would, I'm not a military guy, but if they've got scalar weaponry and they've got HARP, I mean, they've got earthquakes they can cause. I mean, there are a lot of other things they can do besides going. I mean, that just seems like the nth degree of insanity. Why would they do it?
It's like asking, when I talk about Endeavour and the space shuttle being such an outmoded method of getting
Right.
the EIS, and people say, well, you know, if we have all this cool stuff that you say, like, you know, satellites and anti-grav stuff and everything, why do they use a space shuttle? The same thing with the nuke thing. There's levels of secrecy, levels of intelligence. You want to keep a certain segment of the people knowing, just, you know, thinking that the space shuttle is all we got, you know, and nuclear weapons is all we got, so we use those. It's that type of deal.
Okay, so you're going to kill millions of people, eliminate...
I don't think it'll be millions, but it'll be a few.
And what is Iran going to do at that point, you know?
Oh, they'll get all pissed off. I don't really know what they'll do.
Uh-huh. Okay, do you have any inside contacts about this?
Let's see, about Iran, about nuking Iran?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. What about 2012 and a hologram of an alien invasion? Have you heard this scenario?
Absolutely would be probably what they're going to do. They're going to put a hologram and say, oh, we're being attacked, you know, by aliens. We've made a deal with the ambassador, and he says that they feel that Earth is a threat. But if you all take any weapons you have and turn them in, that they'll give us a second chance.
So at that point, we have one world government because they can put everybody under the same roof, and basically all the countries. You're talking not individuals bringing their rifles. But
Yeah, individuals. Yeah, that's one of the things.
Forward with their.
That's one of the things the aliens want, is for all you guys, you know, to turn in your individual weapons so that they don't feel so much of a threat.
But aliens, come on. Well, okay, so this is a scenario.
It's a scenario where the government wants to disarm us, and the way is to put a hologram up there of an attack, and they say we've been in communications with them.
A
and
common enemy, and,
Right.
and it's a fake enemy.
And you can really help us if you'll turn in all your weapons. Of course, by the time we turn in all our weapons, you know, there's not much we can do when we find out it's just a scam, like 9/11 was. Yeah, that's a scenario. I'm sure that's going to happen.
Area 51. Turns out Area 51 has a sister facility, Area 52, and it's a place to see the
He's driving home about the time I get to Los Angeles and get my cell phone. I said, Bob, he says, where the hell are you? And I said, well, I accidentally got on the wrong airplane. I'm in Los Angeles. So that was the big laugh for about 5 years, that John Lear gets on the wrong airplane.
Okay, with your ideas, and they're pretty cutting edge, basically. Do your friends agree with you?
I don't have any friends.
Come on, John. I don't believe you.
Friends.
You're one of the most charming guys we've come across.
My good friend Bob Lazar thinks I'm nuts. So,
Does he really?
yeah, he told us at the birthday party.
And he works on UFOs. So
As a matter of
where's
fact,
that
if
going?
you'll reach behind you, I would like to read his birthday present to me. It's that cup that says
Okay.
JL.
Right.
Just hand it over here. Okay, now Bob Lazar had this made for me, and this is my birthday present. Basically, what this is
What does it say?
periodic table of elements, and the periodic table of 116 is JL, and it says it's a human solid, and the atomic mass is 256.89, and it has all
great.
the stuff there, and then it says element John Lear, occurrence found primarily in Nevada. Physical properties. JL is a rare and unstable element. It is best known for its remarkable ability to resist common sense and facts.
Oh, jeez.
Applied liberally, JL has been known to improve the quality of lawns. It is also known to absorb great quantities of expensive substances. It is one of the most powerful money-reducing agents known to man. prolonged exposure to this element can cause severe physical, mental, and financial damage.
That's great. Okay, and you've told us off camera that Bob Lazar has gone back in working for the government.
Yeah, he works back at Los Alamos National Laboratories.
What's he working on?
I have no idea. One of the things he told us is when he went back to work, they had a short chat with him, and before they gave him his clearance, they said, "Now, Bob, you're not going to cause us any more problems, are you?" And he said no.
Well, they basically threatened him to get him to come back in, isn't that right? I mean, he was having all kinds of problems right before that.
I didn't hear that part.
Okay. But he's been inside for about 4 years.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And you're saying that it's possible he might give interviews.
Yeah. He did the Travel Channel a couple of years ago, and just the other day did somebody else, but it would be best that you did not mention my name. Just call him up out of the blue.
Okay, but he's your friend, right?
Yeah, he's a good friend. He came to my birthday party, and it was really great. As I've told you, I used to have 2 wicker chairs here. In 1987, I started talking about UFOs. I gave a lecture at the Spring Valley Library. Well, it created such a ruckus here in Las Vegas. People were calling. There were people wanting to interview me. I mean, it just exploded. And, of course, it disrupted my family here because people were calling. Marilee eventually had my phone shut off. She took all my UFO files. I mean, it was bad. And so in 1988, a guy called. He said, "My name is Gene Huff. I'm a real estate appraiser, and I'd like to get some of your tapes and stuff." I said, "Gene, I'm out of it. It's almost cost me my family. I'm just not doing it." He says, "Okay, well, if you ever want to trade some tapes, I'll trade you a real estate appraisal for it." And I said, "Oh, wait a minute," because, I needed some money. I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll get you those tapes and you appraise my house." So he came over the day after that to do the measurements. Of course, he had no idea it was 7,700 square feet. He's complained ever since because he had to do such a huge house for just a couple of tapes and some information. Well, anyway, when he came over, he brought this guy named Bob Lazar, and he introduced him to me. Bob was the guy that holding the end of the measuring tape, and he said Bob used to work at Los Alamos National Laboratories, and he lives in town now and develops photos. And so I said, great, So Gene and I are talking about UFOs, and Bob was rolling his eyes. He said, "You guys are nuts. This could not be true. I worked at Los Alamos. I had a Q clearance. If it had been true, I would have known about it. I did enough snooping around there." So he didn't want to hear about any of this stuff. So anyway, that was like in June of '88. So over the next 4 or 5 months, Gene and I and Bob exchanged information. And Bob, there was 3 or 4 things that pushed him over of this is totally ridiculous, that it might be true. And one of them was, in those days we knew about a secret facility at Los Alamos called YY-2, and my information was that it was where they held aliens there. And then there was something else. But anyway, Bob found out, there was YY-2, and it was way more classified than he could end. And there was like 3 or 4 things. And anyway, in November, that was when Bob decided that, well, I think I'll see if I can get a job up at Area 51. So he called Dr. Teller, who he knew from Los Alamos, and I think I was there when Bob talked to him, and Teller said, "Do you want to work out here at Lawrence Livermore with me or there in Nevada?" And Bob said, "I want to work at Groom Lake." And so Teller said, "Okay, well, let me get back with you." So then Bob had 3 interviews down at EG&G, and he would come up here after each interview. And I remember after the second interview, the first question was, "Do you know John Lear? And what do you think of John Lear?" And Bob said, "Yeah, I know him, and I think he sticks his nose into places where it doesn't belong." And Bob told me what I didn't tell them was, I also like to stick my nose into places where it doesn't belong. So he got his 3rd interview, and he told us, he aced him because they talked about really technical stuff. And he just laid it out, and he said, I did a good job. Anyway, the next thing I know is December 6th of 1988, Bob comes, sits down, and he says, I saw a disc today. And I'm writing out checks there, you know, and I'm not paying attention. I said, what? He says, I saw a disc today. And a disc? Theirs or ours? And he said, theirs. I said, you went to Groom Lake? And he said, yeah. And I said, what are you doing here? I said, obviously they're going to follow you. Why don't you just, you know, work there for a while and then come and tell us what happened? He says, because I have seen you take so much crap over the past 6 months about this. I'm telling you, it's real. I saw it. I touched it, you know. And then we spent about 2 hours talking about stuff. And it was just totally shocking. And
Okay, and then, but tell us that story. I mean, we got it on the other tape, but it's just so much fun, where he sits down and says, John, you'll never know what it's like.
That was January. And he'd been up there 2 or 3 times, or 4 or 5 now, I don't know how many. And I remember January, because it was bitter cold, and I had a short sleeve shirt on like this, and Bob comes in and sits there, and you know, he's just on. He's lit. And he wants to talk about something, and we already knew we shouldn't talk in here. So we went out by the pool, and Marilee's coming this way, and, you know, she said, what are you two doing? You know, we're going out, you know, to talk, you know, and she's suspicious of anything anyway, so she doesn't believe that for a second, but she lets us go. So we went out in that little back place by the stable, and I'm looking at him and said, what? He said, John, you will never know what it's like to see your first alien. I said, you saw one? He said, yeah. I said, it couldn't have been a doll, it couldn't have been, no, it was one. And, you know, these days you ask him that question, he says, well, I don't know, could have been a doll, they were doing all these weird stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But that night, that's exactly what he said.
Okay.
And I said, how did it happen? He says, well, I was walking down the corridor, he said, I got a guard on each side, and he said, I walked by this door, and there's like a 12-inch window pane, and it has wires through it, and I looked through it, and there's 2 guys in lab coats facing me, and an alien standing up talking to them. Now, did I show you that picture?
No, I don't think so.
Because he drew it for me.
Oh, really?
Do you want me to
You have
do you want me to get up?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
These are a lot of stuff I kept from Bob. For instance, here's how security clearance works. The lowest clearance you can get is top secret. And then above that, there's 28 levels of top secret crypto. And then above that, there's 10 levels. Now, these aren't the real names, except the top one is Majestic. Now, each one of these are compartmentalized, so that you may have top secret crypto 25, but you don't get to know all that information. All you get to know is what you're cleared for. In other words, when you get top secret crypto 25, somebody doesn't come and tell you this is all the stuff that the guys at top secret crypto 25 get to know. It's compartmentalized. So we had this to show that the President of the United States is like top secret crypto 17. He doesn't need to know very much. He's a figurehead. He's told what to do. And
right.
So he doesn't really need to know all this. The last president, my understanding, the last president that was given any kind of a briefing was President Nixon. Ford knew a little bit. Reagan knew a little bit. Of course, Bush knew something because he was, you know, director of the CIA. That doesn't mean they tell the director of the CIA anything. He's an appointed office, and they hate appointees. So he knew that from other reasons. But anyway, this is how that chart worked. And these are the when Bob decided not to go back to work for the government. We took him into got three regressive hypnosis sessions, and they were Lane Keck. And Lane was supposed to be at my birthday party, and I don't remember why he didn't come. Or maybe he did come. I think he did come. We'll see on that DVD. But he did the regressions for Bob. And what we tried, it was extremely interesting. The first one we didn't get because the tape recorder broke, and Gene Huff has those on notes. But the second one, I had the second one, and that's where we tried to pull the information out of. And I'll tell you what here later, if you want. I have a transcript of the second one, and I'll let you read it because it's extremely interesting.
That'd be great.
This is when Bob was telling me how you went forward and backward in time. And
Okay, I was going to ask you that. So Bob worked on time travel, didn't he?
he didn't work on it. He was briefed on it. See, when he went up
If he
there,
knew Teller, he must have, and he worked at Los Alamos. I mean,
he only knew Teller because he met him that day in front of Los Alamos when Teller was giving the speech, and Bob was on the cover of the Los Alamos Times with his jet car, and he walked up to Dr. Teller and said, "That's who I'm the guy you're reading about." And Dr. said, "Oh, really neat." And they had a little chat. But that's the only place he knew him from. He didn't work with him.
I see.
But he did work at Los Alamos, and he did listen to Teller talk. So Bob, when he went up to S4, he said, they asked, you have to choose what you want to do. You can't have a little bit of it all. You have to choose, do you want to be, work on this or that? And Bob wanted to work on reverse engineering the propulsion. That was his job. But he got briefed on all this, and what he's showing me here is how you go forward in time, which is just exerting a strong gravitational pull, and how you go aft. And he started drawing it like that, and then he put his scribblies, I don't know. So anyway, these were the Bob Lazar, 1987. He was drawing me the different shapes of vehicles that were at S4. And this one, what he's doing here is he's showing me one had been hit by a projectile. And when I first, let's see here, when I first started showing Bob the pictures of the moon and showing him stuff that was on there, I was saying, look at this, vapor and this and that, and he kind of looked at me real skeptical, and then he said, John, I walked out the door, and then walking out of the door of his home, he says, John, if any of this stuff is true, I'm going to have to kill myself. And so I said, why don't I get that on paper, Bob? So I had him sign this thing that says, I, Bob Lazar, promise to kill myself if any of John's moon stuff is true. Signed, Bob Lazar, August 23rd, 1996. Well, what happened is, when I finally got somebody, when I ordered that photograph from NASA, they sent me the negative. It was a 16 by 20 negative.
Right.
And it took me, 5 or 6 years before the technology got even to Las Vegas to make a positive that size negative. So when I got it, I took it over to Bob's house, and there's a little one right here. This was the first I got, and I took it over to Bob, and he scanned it. And those are the scans went on ATS. And so up here, I'll let you do a close-up later, there's obviously what looks like a parking garage. So Bob looks at it and looks at it and looks at it. He says, yeah. He says, I got to admit, that is not natural. That is something. And so I said, Bob, we've been friends for a long time, and I know you're a man of your honor. And you have agreed that if any of my moon stuff was true, that you would kill yourself. And he says, well, is there any way I can get out of it? And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, why don't you just sign this statement here? And this is August 5th, 1998. This is 2 years later. It says, I, Bob Lazar, in return for not having to honor my commitment to kill myself, if any of John's moon stuff was true, do freely admit that the object in the crate of Copernicus on the moon, saved as apple crate, is a box which I don't know what is doing there. Signed, Bob Lazar. Now that's the best I could get him to do, but that is really the infamous parking garage on ATS that I show everybody, and people say, no, I don't see a parking garage, but I'll show you the enlargements later. But anyway, these are some more. This is the original drawing he did on how the antimatter reactor worked, and this is how he showed me the arches were in the. And
that was what year?
This is all between December and March of December of 1988, March of 1899. And these are the notes I kept. Meeting with Bob Lazar, November 2nd, 1988, because I typed up this stuff.
I see.
And
Now,
it says,
now, did he draw an alien for you or not?
yeah.
You got it there? We'd love to see that.
I realized that that's what we read to get this. Now, the original is blue, and I'm sure it's here somewhere, but this is the original drawing he made me, drawn by Bob Lazar, December 1988, January 1988, disc hangers at S4. Position of gray in relation to two scientists in lab coats. Size, orientation, and construction of window through which he saw scientists and the gray. So this is, he was scribbling all over. This is the test site, and whereas 4 was. This was the length of the hangars, 360 feet, and each bay was 40 feet long. This was how the saucers sat in the hangar. And this drawing right here is the two, and this is what Bob drew. These are the two lab technicians, and that's the little alien facing the other way. And he drew the door, and he drew that wire going through the window. He said he looked through that and saw those guys right there.
That's great. Did they ever have any exposure, like communication with them?
Yeah, 3 times, at least 3 times.
Really?
And I'll just show this because this was on the back side of the piece of paper. This is Aurora, and this was the airplane we have that cruises at 250,000 feet and goes Mach 12, and that was in 1988. And this is what it looked like when he stepped down from the Boeing 737. When he walked down the ramp this way, that thing was parked towards him, so he was looking up the tail. And he said it was absolutely enormous. He said there was 2 giant squares where the exhaust was, and he said a man would look like a little doll, standing in those.
Wow. He's looking at it from behind. This is a...
He's looking at it from behind.
Yeah.
So he doesn't know exactly. He just assumed that that's what it looked like in plan view. So anyway, the 3 times that he saw the alien was the first time was when they gave him the pine-smelling fluid. And what they did, it's really interesting, when Bob came in here the very first day, and he said, I saw a disc. I said, and he used to wear a ring, and I forget which finger it was on. I said, okay, now listen to me, Bob. They're going to give you some drugs and to make you forget what you're doing. So what I want you to do is, when they take you in to give you the drugs, I want you to take your ring off subtly and put it on your other hand. You won't remember, but when you come up to see me, I'll see it, and you'll know you already taken the drugs. He said, wow. They already did that today. I said, they did? And he said, and he described this elaborate drug test of, how they took a needle and they put a rectangle on his, scratched a rectangle on his arm, and then made lines like this and lines like that, and then they take stuff and they put into each little square like that. And then they took him into a room, and he said the room was just like a regular doctor's office, and there was a couch, and he laid on the couch, and he said there was a screen and blocking something, and he said he knew the gray was behind it. Then there was a military guy with an M16 and a doctor and a nurse, and they had him drink the pine-smelling fluid, and he drank the cup, and immediately he felt, dizzy. And he said he described exactly what he felt like. He said he felt like he was in a well that was 100 feet deep, that his arms were 100 feet long, and he was just holding on to the sides of the well, just barely with his fingertips. That's what he felt like. Huh. He said then they started to read the clearance with which he was, or the briefing of the clearance with which he was being given. So they'd say, they'd read a sentence, and say, and I understand that, I am being briefed, and at the end, the soldier would take the M16 and poke it into his stomach like that. And he said it really hurt. And each different phase of the clearance, the soldier would take the M16 and poke it into his solar plexus. So, and so in the tapes that Lane Keck did, when we were trying to get the information out, you know, they told him a lot of really interesting stuff, and when we would get to, you know, well, what's going to happen in the future, you know, he'd say, I'm not supposed to talk about that. And then Lane would try to work around it with some subtlety, and Bob would grab it, he says, no, I can't, it hurts.
Oh, no.
And
Wow.
so that was the...
So like a programming thing.
Right.
So did he ever do the ring trick?
No, because he had already done it. You know, he said they already
But
tried
he
it.
had to keep going to work, so...
See, the reason he quit was because when we got caught, you know, he invited us up to see the flying saucer flights on May 21st, or March 21st, 1989. And I have that tape right here, and I'll show you. It's only 9 minutes long. We took that Celestron 8, and we saw, you know, he told us when it was going to fly, and me and Gene are right there, and I focused in on it, and I saw a flying saucer, you know, and it was, you know, tilted about 40 degrees, and it was gold, and it had the stuff radiating off, and I said, quit, Gene, quit, take a look. And as I stepped back, I hooked my foot around the thing. So that came up at the birthday party, because everybody at the birthday party was supposed to tell a John Lear story. And that was Bob's story. And,
Okay, well, also the story about getting stopped on the road and the
Right.
Guns in the car.
That was when the county sheriff stopped us, and that was the third time we got caught. But the point of that story was that when they took him in the next morning to Indian Springs, which is the center of all the security, and took him out of the car with a gun in his ear, they said, now, Bob, when we gave you this clearance, it meant you were not supposed to tell all your friends about the flying saucers. Now, do you want to work here or not? And that's when Bob was non-committal, because the last 2 flights he had taken up to Groom Lake, he could remember walking up the steps and walking down, but he couldn't remember anything in between, and he said he didn't want to work on a program like that.
Well, what about the tall whites? Because from what I understand, you know, Charles Hall talks about the tall whites being out at Indian Wells, that area. You know anything about that?
Mm-mm.
Bob ever talk about the tall whites?
Mm-mm.
No.
No, only the grays, and they only had the 3 times. The once was when the pine-smelling fluid, and the once was seeing them in the room. And then once, when George Knapp hired Tavernetti to come up and do the lie detector test, George rented a room at Caesar's Palace, and Bob and Gene Huff got there early, and they knew the room, and so they pulled the door open, and Gene pulled the door open, Bob looked inside, and he turned white and nearly fainted, and he walked over and he sat down in a chair, and Gene says, what in the heck is the matter with you? And Bob said, I just had a flashback. He said, I remember talking with the gray. And what had happened is when they opened the door, the way that Tavernetti had set up there, it wasn't very much light. It was one single table with a chair on one side and a chair on the other side and some equipment there. It triggered this reaction of Bob when he was reading the briefings, and the gray was across from him. And it was such an overwhelming experience of when you first, you know, are in the presence of a gray, when, you know, you're used to asking a question and then having somebody respond, but when you're talking to an alien, they pick it up from your mind, and they're answering before you can get out of your mouth, and it gets confusing. And it was just an overwhelming experience. So that was the other time that Bob had the...
Now, do you think he'll go on camera with this stuff?
I doubt it, but, you know, you never know what he's going to do. Never know what he's going to do. So let me look through here. This is the page when we were trying to think of the guy he worked with, Castrioloni. But I think we finally determined what the guy's name was, and George Knapp has it, but I don't know what...
So is George Knapp working for the agency?
No, George Knapp works for Channel 8. Oh, you mean undercover?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. George knows a lot of stuff. And he had me on a couple of months ago, and what he was doing was a story on Sandia. Sandia is the most secret, or not the most secret, it's the secret base here that replaced Groom Lake, Area 51. And it's out on the Paiute Mesa, and I got a map of it here. They started building it in 1980 and finished it in 1987, so it's now 20 years old. About, 4,000 or 5,000 people work out there. I mean, it's a huge underground base, absolutely enormous. I mean, there's great big cylinders of offices and stuff that go, a mile deep, and then out on the test site, there's a couple of runways with all new hangars there and everything. It's just a massive operation. So when George went up there to film it, and he couldn't find it, but anyway, I'll show you. As a matter of fact, I have it here on DVD. I'll show you the exact thing that we did. I told him that one of the interesting things was that how do we get the people out there? They can't drive out there because it's too far. Can't have that many people on Highway 93 or 95 because we'll be exposing that stuff. We can't put them on the 737s because they're already full now, and we can't put on more airplanes going out there. So what they did is they built a high-speed train that goes from Sandia down to Vegas, and what they did is they put the stops under two of the major hotels so that the guys, it just looked like gamblers or hotel guests walking in there, and they go in there, they open a door, do the card key, and go down to the thing. And it was great how they do that.
Which hotels,
Yeah, but I'm not going to say.
That's great.
So I got to show you.
Have you ever taken the train?
No.
You know where it is. You can,
I've been meaning to go down there, but I try to stay out of trouble. Here's the Los Alamos monitor that Dr. Teller was reading when Bob was.
Okay, yeah, that's great stuff.
Yeah, I have a friend, Jim Goodall, and he said, I'm coming down there, we're going to go up to the test site. And I said, I used to do that stuff, but I'm still alive, so, it's all the same to you. I don't want to do it. Here's three things that I wrote down that were important. I came up with the speed of time, and Bob said, I told him what it was. He said, that's correct, but he said, who cares? And what I said was the speed of time is directly proportional to the amplitude of the gravitational flux. In other words, the speed of time is dependent on gravity. Then Bob told me it is theorized that there is one black hole for every galaxy. It's theorized that every black hole has its own galaxy. HIV, the protein code, is on the virus itself. And the recycle time of the gravity amplifiers is 10 milliseconds. Now, the HIV, have we talked about HIV?
No, but we can definitely go there.
AIDS was invented by a Navy surgeon named R.M. Donner, and when Bob read the briefing up at S4, one of the things that impressed him is that in the paper, all the briefings he read were, 50, 100 pages with a blue cover, and they were scattered on this table, and he could take each one. And what it was that as he progressed his clearance, these briefings would, let's say this is one briefing, it would be stapled here. And as his clearance progressed, they would unstaple a few more pages. But anyway, on the briefing of AIDS, and I have it's probably in here, because I wrote a whole thing on what he told us. It was developed, to get rid of a certain segment of, or number of human, but it was developed by R.M. Donner, and it has the exact cure for AIDS, and it has to do with the cucumber Trichosanthus curalawi, which is only grown in China. We tried to get it out of China, 3 attempts, but however they know, somebody knows, and each one had been cooked either by a microwave or something as it passed through customs, so it's impossible to get it out. But I'll read you the exact cure and how it works, and if you could.
Well, we have a contact right now who says he worked on that, on engineering AIDS virus in Africa.
Possible, but it wasn't in Africa. It was here, and it was released in Africa, but it was developed up at S4. So Bob and I looked for R.M. Donner. We found him. He lived in Santa Fe, and he was retired, and we went to see him several times because Bob then had the contract for the repairing the alpha probes. And what we used to do is we used to drive to Los Alamos from here. It was a 16-hour drive, and Bob had a friend there, and it used to take us like 24 hours to rebuild all these alpha probes. There was like 300 of them. And we'd clean them all up and then rewire them and then put the aluminum tape on them, and then we drive back to Las Vegas.
What's an alpha probe?
They scan for radiation of the people that go in and work in Los Alamos.
Oh.
And Bob had the contract. So we did that about every 6 weeks. So what we do is we try to, we knew where Donner worked, and we go there and we missed him every time, and then we finally got his home address, and we went to his home, and we could never catch him home. Now, whether he was not answering the door, or whether he was not really there, or whether we didn't really have an address, I think we did. We never met up with him. Now, when Bob started to make some money on the photo business and the alpha probes, we actually went on the airline to go to Albuquerque, and we'd rent a car to go up to Los Alamos. So this one day, and the same things happened on this one day, and I told this in the John Lear stories. I'm going to tell this on myself. So I have trouble recognizing Earth people. For some reason, I just can't. If I haven't known them for 25, and even if I do know them for 25 years, it's hard for me to pick them out of a crowd. So what we would do is to go to Albuquerque. Bob would buy a ticket on Southwest, and I'd jump seat with my airline ID. So one morning we get ready to go. We're going to leave at 7 o'clock, and I go to the airport, and I don't want to get on the airplane unless he's on it. And I walked up and down at all the passengers and looked very carefully. I couldn't find Bob. So I didn't want to get on if he wasn't there, and I couldn't reach him at home. So when everybody got on, I asked the flight attendant, I said, hey, I'm a jump seat on, but I want to be sure a friend of mine, could you ask Bob Lazar to ring his call button? Well, of course, what I had forgotten is on this particular flight going to Albuquerque, that's all the Sandia and other guys that go on this flight. So when the flight attendant would Bob Lazar please ring his call button? Of course, the whole airplane, everybody starts laughing because they think it's a joke.
That's great.
So anyway, he rang his call button. I realized he was there, so I got in the jump seat and went to Albuquerque. We rented a car, drove up to Los Alamos, and for some reason this day, everything went perfect. I mean, we just slid through that thing in about 8 hours. And so we realized that we could drive back, get on the airplane, and have dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant called Parma's. So we pack all this stuff up and write the bill, and we go tearing down the mountain from Los Alamos to Albuquerque, and down the freeway. We screech into the rent-a-car place, jump right on the van that's just pulling out, get to the airport. Bob runs up, and gives his ticket. I run up, and sign my, jump seat, run in. They close the door. I sit down, and I heard the captain say, welcome to Southwest Airlines 304 on our flight today to Los Angeles. And I realized that I had rung down the wrong gangway and got on the wrong airplane. So meanwhile, Bob is on the airplane waiting for me, and he sees him shut the door, and he can't figure out where I went. So all the way to Las Vegas, he says, well, maybe he got into the cockpit, and I didn't see him. So they get to Las Vegas, and it takes much longer to get to Los Angeles, so I couldn't call him. And he gets to Las Vegas, and he goes up to the cockpit, and I'm not there, and he cannot understand how we could have been so close, and I didn't get on the airplane. So he's driving home about the time I get to Los Angeles and get my cell phone. I said, Bob, he says, where the hell are you? And I said, well, I accidentally got on the wrong airplane. I'm in Los Angeles. So that was the big laugh for about 5 years, that John Lear gets on the wrong airplane. The information that Bob got up at S4 was AIDS is a virus that is protected by the protein coat on the RNA preventing the antibodies, the T4 cells, of the immune system from detecting and eliminating it. The alleged cure for AIDS lies in the excrement of the white fungus that's grown from the Chinese cucumber Trichosanthus curulaui. This excrement, which develops after about 2 or 3 weeks, is separated with hydrazine sulfate in an acidification process which dissolves the protein coat on the RNA and exposes the nucleus of the virus that's detected by the antibodies of the immune system. Regardless of how weak the immune system is, the virus will be destroyed. No more than 20 cc dose per 36-hour period should be administered. No antibiotics should be used during this period. The 20 cc's are metabolized in 36 hours, having dissolved the protein coat on the virus. And I mentioned here, over the last 20 years, I've been party to several attempts to get samples of the Trichosanthus curulaui out of China, but all have met with failure, the last samples having been cooked during departure procedures. Now, the October surprise is in 1980, when Reagan and Bush were running against Carter and Mondale. As you know, the hostages were still in Iran, in Tehran, and then Bush took an airplane to Paris to meet not with the Khomeini, but a representative of the Khomeini, and the deal was if the Khomeini would delay the release of the hostages until Reagan's inauguration, that the Reagan-Bush administration would supply him, the Iranian regime, unlimited guns and ammunition throughout their administration, which would go from 1980 till 1988. My part in that was to deliver those guns and ammunition from Tel Aviv to Tehran. The reason I brought this up is that big sheath of papers over there is the details of who was flying and how they pulled the whole thing off. The way they pulled it off is Bush left Saturday night on a back 111 jet, which only took about 6 or 7 hours to get there. He only spent about 4 or 5 hours in the meeting, and then he was flown back in an SR-71 from a base in France to McGuire Air Force Base, and it only took 1 hour and 14 minutes. That way he was able to show up for a tennis appointment that he had on Sunday, and that the press would have not known of the lapse in time or the trip. And as it turned out, they were elected and they supplied these guns and ammunition, and that was, you know, part of the Iran-Contra, but Congress never went back as farther than 1985 to find out when it originally started. And when I moved to Egypt in 1981, that was going to be my job, was to take those arms and ammunition from Israel, from Tel Aviv to Tehran. They were coming into Tel Aviv from Zaragoza, our Air Force base in Spain, and Mossad was handling the whole thing. The reason I never did fly a flight, and the reason was the first airplane in was a Argentinian CL-44, and what they wanted to do was use an old turboprop airplane to be sure everything went fine and there were going to be no problems. And for some reason it got shot down on its way out, and it got shot down over Russia about 40 miles south of Yerevan, and which is well inside Russia. And the Mossad couldn't figure out how the pilots got off course. They were on their way out. They had dropped a load, or, you know, already dumped the arms and ammunition off, and they finally figured out that what must have happened is the pilots were intercepted by the Russian MiGs, who knew what was going on and didn't like it. And the pilots thought, well, you know, might as well follow them because we got nothing on board. They can't prove anything. And then as soon as they got them over Russia, just shot their ass down, which was a message to Mossad, hey, we don't want this to go on. So that big sheath of papers, was the history behind the October Surprise. There were 2 books, one Gary Sick and Barbara Honecker, each wrote books about it. Congress went as far as to actually launch an official investigation in 1990, but it was all covered up because, nobody wanted to go back that far, hear any more stories about that thing. But the hostages did spend, October, November, December, an extra 4 months there.
So Reagan could be elected.